Hello everyone, welcome to the lesson An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum by Stephen Spender. This poem is going to be covered in two videos. This is the first video explained by Deepshika ma'am. Moving on. Have you ever visited or seen an elementary school in a slum? Do you know what it looks like? It probably looks like the one shown on your screen right now. Moving on to the first answer. Please take out your books and pay attention as we read and number the lines if you could. Moving on.
Stanza 1. Far, far from gusty waves, these children's faces, like rootless weeds, their hair torn round their pallor. The tall girl with her weighed down head, the paper seeming boy with rat's eyes, the stunted, unlucky heir of twisted bones, reciting a father's gnarled disease, his lessons from his desk. At the back of his dim class, one unnoted, sweet and young. His eyes live in a dream of squirrel's game in tree room other than this.
So, students, this poem deals with the central themes of poverty, education, and childhood. It takes the setting of a classroom in a slum to critique the economic conditions and the economic system that has created these slums in the first place, and also the ineffective nature of education that is used to impart education to these poor children. In that sense, the poem can be viewed as a social commentary. The poem seeks to demonstrate the distance between the representation of the world that is taught to these poor children inside the classroom and the world existing outside the windows of the classroom. The first line of the poem emphasizes this distance by using the literary device of repetition. Far, far from the gusty waves, far from the semblance of the strong and forceful gusty waves of the ocean, the faces of the children look like rootless weed and their hair is torn around their pale and malnourished faces. A simile like rootless weed is used to describe the manner in which the society perceives and treats these students. The children of the poor do not have any foundation, any root, or any social security to help them grow in one place. Rather, they are tossed about and are treated as unwanted elements of a large section of a society. They are treated like weeds. Just like in a garden, you have flowers and plants that you want to grow, and then you have weeds that you tear out because they are unwanted. Similarly, these children are treated like weeds. Students, please note that the sentences given in the color green and underlined are the exact sentences used in the poem. So, underline these sentences as we go through. The tall girl with her weighed down head. The paper seeming boy with rat's eyes. A tall girl stands with a bowed down head, far from being lively and energetic. She stands with her head weighed down, possibly due to the burden of poverty. The girl is definitely not happy. Coming on to the phrase or the sentence, the paper seeming boy with rat's eyes. This is a brilliant metaphor that is used to describe the unfortunate kid who is so thin that he looks like he is made of paper. The word paper pulls in dual themes, first of poverty and second of education, around which the poem revolves. Poverty has made them look just like yet another object used in the classroom, that is paper. The metaphor of rat's eyes provides an indication of starvation and also highlights the desperate scavenging efforts that results from starvation. Students, as you have already gone through the chapter of Sahib Alam, Lost Spring, in which you have the stories of Mukesh the bangle maker as well as Sahib Alam the rag picker, you should be able to draw parallels and state allegorically that these two lessons are very intertwined. Moving on. Notice that in the first stanza, We use one element from the plant kingdom and another from the animal kingdom just to describe the way in which these children, the children of the poor, are perceived by the society. This dehumanization of the children of the poor is further complicated if one is to extend the rat metaphor. One might question what is that the boy with rat's eyes doing in a place where he seems to be so uncomfortable and feels so confined. This may lead us to question what is the nature of the place which has confined the boy with rat's eyes. Is it merely a classroom or a trap, a rat trap? Though the space may look like a classroom, it actually functions like a rat trap. Next on in the poem, we come across another boy who has inherited a genetic disorder from his father, due to which he cannot stand and has to remain seated while reciting his lesson. The last boy is a very young kid who is too young to understand or feel the effects of poverty he has been born into, due to which he shows no visible signs of the effect of poverty but thinks more often of squirrel's game, and his mind wanders in places other than the classroom. He's physically present in the classroom but mentally he's there out with the squirrels. Moving on to the second stanza of the poem.
Stanza 2. On sour cream walls, donations, Shakespeare's head cloudless at dawn. Civilized dome riding old cities, belled flowery Tralles Valley, open handed map awarding the world its world. And yet, for these children, these windows, not this map, their world, where all the futures painted with a fog, a narrow street sealed in with lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of words.
Moving on to the explanation. The dingy, rancid atmosphere of the class is highlighted by the use of the term sour cream walls. The effectiveness of the phrase can be understood by the fact that sour cream catches both olfactory and ocular senses of the reader. Now, olfactory is the smell of sour cream, cream that has gone rancid, cream that has gone rancid, cream that has gone foul. And the ocular sense is the sight, olfactory is the smell. You don't like the smell of foul cream, or neither do you appreciate its sight. Similarly, the classroom is something that you will not appreciate, be it your olfactory senses or your sight senses. The room is filled with donations, a Shakespeare's bust, an open handed map, and then a painting of the beautiful Tralles Valley. Students, the meaning of bust over here is of a sculpture of a person's head and shoulders. You might have seen it in many places. I'll attach a photo over here so that you can understand. This is the version of the world that is provided to the students. Which version is provided? The version of a beautiful Tralles Valley of Shakespeare of the world map. However, this version of the world so provided doesn't match with the reality of the world which they actually live in. The map doesn't provide an honest portrayal of the real world. The honest portrayal is instead presented by the windows of the classroom through which the children can view the day to day hardship that they have to endure and the pathetic conditions they live in. The children have a bleak future beyond the classroom, and the windows open to a view of a place where all their future is painted with fog. This is in sharp contrast with the beautiful Tralles Valley painting donated to the classroom. The fog here represents the obscurity, that is, the uncertainty of the future. The future of these children is uncertain, as in contrast with the paintings and Shakespeare and the other aspects donated in the classroom. Moving on to line 2. A narrow street sealed in with the lead sky, far, far from rivers, capes, and stars of words. The narrow streets seem to represent the narrow prospects the children have, and the lead sky, which seals the roof, is used to signify the limits beyond which the children will never be able to move. Literally, the lead is a testimony of air pollution caused by industrialization, one of the direct causes for the creation of slums and rest conditions in which the children find themselves. The grim reality is far, far from the romantic image of the river, of the valley, and the scenes created by the hollow words of the poet. Moving on to the third stanza.
Stanza 3. Surely Shakespeare is wicked, the map a bad example, with ships and sun and love tempting them to steal, for lives that slyly turn in their cramped holes, from fog to endless night. On the slag heap these children wear skins peeped through by bones and spectacles of steel with mended glass, like bottle bits on stones. All of their time and space are foggy slum. So blot their maps with slums as big as doom. The tone of the poem changes from despair to rebellion. Shakespeare, the epitome of culture and erudition, is said to be wicked, and the map is dubbed as a bad example. The picture of ships, sun, and lake conjured by poets in the impressionable minds of the vulnerable children mislead them with the sights of a world which they might never be able to inhabit. Moreover, by providing them with a glimpse of the unattainable, they tempt the children to resort to ways that might incite them to commit crimes. It is not only irresponsible but also an immoral to paint pretty pictures of a perfect place to children who live in a suffocating hovels, who move from one endless night to another without any dawn of hope. The children are so malnourished that they appear to be wearing skins. Clearly, it is food that they need before education. They wear spectacles of steel, and that too made of mended glass. Their poverty shapes the lens with which they view the world, and all they can actually see is the foggy sight of the awful slums they live in. We come to stanza 4. Unless the governor, inspector, or visitor, this map becomes their window, and these windows that shut upon their lives like catacombs. Break, oh, break open till they break the town, and show the children to green fields, and make their world run azure on gold sands, and let their tongues run naked into books, the white and green leaves open. History is theirs, whose language is the sun. The final stanza of the poem is a vehement appeal to change the conditions of the children. The poet appeals government, inspector, and the visitor to gather the political who will convert the map of the theoretical knowledge to the window of lived reality for the children. It is an appeal, a challenge, and a duty to make the living conditions and the surroundings of the slum area as beautiful as those shown in the maps. Until then, the poet asks the authorities to help the children learn from nature and nurture their childhood. Here we have green leaves and white. So the green leaves here refers to the nature and nurturing themselves with the white leaves, that is the leaves of the books. The windows which confine the children need to break, and the children must have an access to green fields and the open sky and the wonders of nature. The poem uses a brilliant imagery to describe the blue sky and the open space that the children should at least be provided with. Run azure on golden sands. The need for change in the material conditions through economic upliftment is symbolized by the gold sand. Only when this happens will the children be able to think on their own, reclaim their lives, and write a history of their own. History will then be written by these children who speak in the language of the sun. What here it means that history only comes for the ones who are known, because many of them die unsung, unknown. So if one has to make history, one has to be exposed to education. That's what the poet means here.
So that will be all with the stanza-wise explanation. We'll be continuing in part 2, where we'll discuss the theme, the setting, and other aspects of the poem. Thank you.